No.
Sure. Okay. Do you have a pink headband on, Glenn?
No, I'm slouching.
I know. I thought there was pink when you. I guess it was.
Is it my cube background?
Pink headband. It must just be the glaze, the shine. You know. Okay. The fluorescent lights. We're going to talk today about something called Julie. You're recording good. Okay. Something called annotation, and it's
Boo.
What?
I said boo hiss.
Boo hiss. Annotation basically are just think of it simply as labels stored in a geodatabase. Okay, so they're labels that are not just they're not only part of your map. They're not part of your map. They're part of a layer. They are a layer of data that can be manipulated and stored and used in multiple maps, multiple NXDs. The reason that we need to use these when we're producing, we used to be, say, printed maps. Now these are PDFs, you know, that the client largely prints themselves or uses in a digital format, is because we need to have a consistent source of labels, of road names and house numbers and city names and things that do not scale when you zoom in and out. They maintain the same size, basically. So that when you print at one scale, you know, you're printing this thing, you get a set of labels that are usable. It'd be like you take a map, you know, you buy a map at a store or something. You expect to be able to read all the labels that show what the road names and the city names and things are. And I know this is kind of you know, we don't have a lot of things on the walls with maps like we used to, and don't use globes like we used to, but it is still very much a thing in our rural governments, especially, to have these products. And we have a couple proposals on the table now to use these. There are a lot of other purposes, but I kind of want to just keep it pretty high level today on how we use it. Just accept it. You need to know how to do it. And you need to know how to, you know, you need to be able to store your annotation and bring them into different map, you know, map content. So, so the first thing we're going to do with annotation is we need to set up our MXD. We need to set up our map project. So that means you need to know what layers you're going to have, what symbology you're using. And then my recommendation is to keep a new file geodatabase that's just going to contain any annotation you create for that specific project. So what we're looking at now and what this training will be on is doing a wall map of the roads for the commissioners in Wagner County. That's a proposal we have out there that they've requested. It looks like it's probably going to be a go. I just sent some revisions to them yesterday. And when I say create this new, I can't even spell. Create this new feature data set, this would be the annotation used on this specific wall map. You may have a map book full of annotation. There might be quite a few other things that, you know, that you might want to create annotation for. So I'm going to create, and I've already done this, a feature data set called Wall Map April 2022. And I'm going to have in there the annotation for the road center lines and for any other layers like the corporate limits or the subdivisions that I might want to label or to have, you know, to have marked on that map that we produce. If I bought a wall map of a county, I'd probably want to have the major water features labeled, if there was a big river or a lake that was in the county, those kinds of points of reference. I wouldn't care so much about knowing which railroad, you know, the railroads that ran through the county were, you know, who owned them, but I would probably want to see the symbology for the railroad on the map. You know, kinds of things that you would expect to see if you were just navigating on a map. This map in particular is going to be used by the commissioners so they know what the county roads that they're maintaining are, what the names of these roads and subdivision roads and things are. Okay, so I've already accomplished that in this in the wall map that I've got here. So I have created a geodatabase called Wagner Annotation with a feature data set called Wagner Wall Map April 2022. And I'm going to be showing you how I got to that certain level of annotation there eventually. So the first thing, of course, you know, you have to know what you're going to have on that map. And if you're going to have address points, your scale, you know, I don't think that we could, in a million years, label the address points in Wagner County on one E-sized wall map. That's about the biggest, that's a 3-foot roll of paper. And so it's basically a 3-foot by a 4-foot wall map. 33 by 44 inches, I think, is the printable area. They understand that. Way too many houses, way too dense to be able to get all those features on there and make them legible. So they want just the roads labeled. If they wanted the house points labeled as well, they would pretty much need a map book with multiple pages, and we would be doing you'd be just labeling them at a much different, much zoomed in scale. You'd be labeling those houses on each page of the map book. But in this case, we're looking at the entire county, one map. It's going to be a long map because the county is wider than it is tall. They want to have insets around the edges here, so it may even be a little wider. Our limitation is the 3-foot roll of paper that fits into the plotter. Okay, so that is a 36-inch limit. So one of the edges, one of the dimensions of the map is limited to 36 inches. You can customize those settings and make it 6 foot long if you wanted to. It's coming off the same roll. Okay, that all makes sense? We'll be telling you, if you're going to produce a map, we're going to be saying, we need this to be this size. Glenn does a lot of PDFs for Wade. I don't know if Curtis does as well, that are C size. It's like a C size is like 2 pieces of tabloid. I think it's 17 by 22 inches. 11 by 17 is 2 legal sizes. It's two letter sizes. It's called tabloid. So, okay. So coming back to my little very simple PowerPoint here. We're going to set the project up. I'm going to put the layers on that I need. I'm going to symbolize the layers pretty much how I want to see them. And I've done so here, and it's just basic. Usually you're going to use some sort of light colored road. I'll symbolize these so the highways are a different color. The color isn't going to affect your label placement. The width of the road may. If you have a really wide road and you have the label set close to the road, and then you change the width, it could push into that label a little bit. Okay, so stop me if you have questions, because it's high level. You'll get this. You'll get both the PowerPoint and the video. Now the next thing we do is we set up the print properties, because we want to know. You want your layout view, which is where the map is going, what the map looks like and how you check your sizes of everything. That's got to be the right physical size for printing. So map books, we generally use a letter size paper, and it's a portrait orientation, okay? And then wall maps, we typically use the ANSI sizes. It's A, B, C, D, E. E's, the C, D's, and E's are the biggest ones. They go from 17 by 22 to 33 by 44. If you want it bigger than that, like a longer width, we do a custom. We do 33 inches or 36 inches by however many inches long we want that map to be. So to set your print properties, if you've not done this, you probably have. It's File, Page and Print Settings. And if you have Use Printer Paper Settings checked, it's only going to give you the settings for the current printer that it's looking at, which is my Epson up here. If you uncheck it, you get all the traditional paper sizes, okay? And that was landscape. So I wanted mine to be an ANSI E. I wanted it to be 44 inches wide by 34 inches, but I could actually customize this and say make it 50 inches wide if I wanted to. So I'm saying you can actually say, this is a really long map and I want to make it longer, or I'm going to have insets, like little, insets on the end of it, so let's make it longer. For this purpose, I'm going to leave it at 44. I'm going to leave it at what I had it set for. So just the ANSI 44 by 34 inches landscape. Remember, unchecking map page size gives you access to larger, page sizes your printer doesn't support. Okay. So I'm going to say okay, And then when I check here on my, it's up to 100, don't I? Where's my zoom to page? There it is. Yeah. So you can see, you know, you can see by the scale, you know, the things up here, it's 44 inches by 33 that way. How it fits on the paper we'll deal with in a little while, but just make sure you have your printer sizes, the printer settings for this project set correctly. Oh, I didn't say a really important thing that I missed is that you should do a save as on your project, make a new project. You do not want to keep this, you know, because you're going to be turning off a lot of layers, not using a lot of layers you would typically use in a maintenance project. So do a save as. I just call this one Anno Layout Training, but just do a save as on your project. Then you can take away and add all the different layers that you need. Okay. Any questions yet? Now we're going to adjust the data frame on the layout view. I did this already earlier, but when you first go to, you know, when you first set your print sizes and you come back here, it probably is going to look like this. So you've been out here, it always defaults to a letter size layout. You've changed your settings in your print, you know, your print and page settings to your custom settings down here or your ANSI E, you know, it's the same thing.
When I do this, I always check the scale maps elements proportionately.
If you do this, it does it automatically. If you forget to check it, you'll see what, you know, so if you check it here, it will actually increase your data frame on your layout view to take up the whole, thank you, Kathleen, because I always forget about that. If you do this, it's going to expand this data frame to fit the whole page. If you don't, you'll have to pull it out yourself. So I'm going to uncheck it and show you. It's real tiny down here, and you would have to move it to make it bigger, okay? If, however, I do the page and print setup, and I check that, and I go to the layout view, it didn't do it, Kathleen. You're muted.
Yeah, I don't know. I just always end up doing that, and it you know, fills out what I see there on the print setup.
If you go back to your, you know, when you go to your layout view and the data frame, that's this piece here that it holds the data you have loaded in your map. If it is tiny, you just need to expand it. And when you expand it, be aware that things do not print to the very, very edge. These margins are a lot bigger than they appear because this map is, you know, this is 5 inches right here. But, you know, it's not a tiny margin there. It's probably a 1/2 inch margin or so. So, you know, so I just expanded. I always leave room on the bottom for a legend. But if the map is an odd size, like if the map is, you know, it has a lot of, it's a county, is like this place right here, I could have a title up here on the map. You know, because it doesn't have to be here on the bottom. You know, sometimes there's just room because of the map elements where you can put different things. This one I know is going to have insets that fill up these areas around the map. So there are a lot, you know, this is cartography, and there's a lot of decisions that have to be made. If you haven't made a lot of maps and we want you to work on annotation, we're probably going to give you all the things we're learning now all set up, and then you're going to be doing the piece we do at the end, which is actually moving the labels and things around. Okay. Leave room for the legend. Got that. Okay. Then we're going to talk about the font we're going to use for the labeling of the map. You can use all sorts of fancy fonts, but we're really concerned about the person using the map being able to read the font fairly easily, because face it, these labels are going to be small. There's no way on a wall-sized map of this county that we're possibly going to be able to read every single label. I mean, of course, it's going to look a lot bigger than it looks right now, you know, because it's going to be, you know, 44 by 33 inches. But you want them to, we want to be able to label as many as possible. Everything in blue, we're going to be deleting those labels. Those are our cities, okay? And we're not going to be labeling cities on a wall map for the county commissioners who don't take care of anything inside the city, okay? So that's not going to be happening. So we have to worry about all these corporate limits. We're going to be just removing that. You can see that all the growth in this county, except for this area over by the lake, is all in or around these incorporated towns. Okay. This is actually Tulsa over here, and it's, you know, Broken Arrow, it's feeding, this is the suburbs of Tulsa. That's why it's dense on that side. So I always just stick to aerial. True cartographers can, you know, can show me, you know, you can make arguments for other sorts of labels. You don't want anything fancy with shading and things like that on just a map that's going to be white. The background's going to be white. You want to think more about ease of reading these labels with, you know, fonts that don't look trippy when when you spin a road name around to put it at a different angle. Note too that on the map itself, if you know, an annotation's like at a 45-degree angle, you're going to see pixelation in that on the screen that you will not see when you print that road name, when you print the text. Okay, always do use a sans serif font though, please, on these things. Okay, so now we're going to start doing the labeling part. When you make annotation, the way you do it is you convert labels on your map to annotation that is stored in a feature class in a geodatabase. So feature classes in geodatabase have attributes. They have names. They have all the attributes, that they need to be able to put that road name out. And those are going to be attributes like the font size and the font itself and the font weight and the angle it's displayed, and then the text that's labeled. And the text that's labeled is based on the font that, on the field that you chose for the label. When we label our complete street name, that street name is going to be spelled out. It's going to be things like East US Highway, all spelled out, 62. It is not necessary on a wall map to have the exact verbiage that you would use for a 911 road name. It is going to be long and cumbersome. If it's a US highway, it can be the highway number inside the US shield, which will show you how to do that eventually. If it is County Road 123, it can be CORD or just CR 123. It makes a shorter label that's easier to read, that's not going to overlap other labels. So we're going to have, and what I do is I manipulate what the road name says by creating a field called label or map label, and then copying the US, copying the complete street name into that field, and then changing, then just doing like find replaces is change all spelled out highways to HWY and all strings that say county road to CR. Does that kind of make sense? I mean, it's not something I'm going to spend tons of time working with you on that, but just remember the label does not have to be your complete street name. However, if it has a directional or a street type on it, you still need those. You still need to know it's east or northeast or it's an avenue or a street or whatever. This county has an odd thing where like their north-south streets are like South 123 East Avenue, and east is spelled out because it's not a post direction. Anyway, it's hard. It's not a post directional. It's because it comes before avenue. So I changed all those east to just E, just to make that road name shorter. But anyway, so the next thing we do is we just make a label field. We're going to make that field, and we're going to manipulate that field to have the correct content in it, to make sure that we are not. Now you can do this though after you make the labels too, because once you create your annotation, it makes an attribute table for the annotation that has that text string that's used to label in it, and that's an editable field. So this is the one I'm going to use. I open that attribute table. This text string is what it's labeling. If I change Whispering Oaks Drive to Wisp Oaks Drive in this table, it will change the annotation too that's on the map because it's just reading from this table. Okay. The problem is if you say, oh, my fonts are all too big or small and I change this font size to like 8 or 12, yeah, it will change the font on the map, but it won't realign the label so that the bottom of the label is, or, you know, whatever. It just, it changes the location of the label when you do that. So it's something I caution against. Just don't create, you know, don't say, oh, my labels are too big and make them all bigger. And here you'll probably have to move, are too small and make them bigger. You'll probably have to move those labels around just to align them better to the roadways. I know this is just theoretical until you see it happen too, so, okay. The hardest thing to do with these maps is to know how big to make the labels, okay? So I say I started at 40,000. This map, I actually started at 50,000. I'm going to change that. On a wall map that's, and I always start with 10-point fonts, okay? On a wall map that is 3 feet by 4 feet, really the best labeling, the smallest scale you can use to label is about 50,000, okay? That means one, you know, so 1 to 50,000 scale, and I'll show you how that works, okay? So we're going to first of all go into the map, get all my annotation I pre-made turned off. I take the map to about 50,000. I've already set my font size to 10-point Arial, okay? And I just right-click on the roads, and I've already sent it to, you know, for the complete street name here. I don't know what label field I use. It doesn't really matter on the demo here, but I just label my features, okay? So that's what it looks like at 50K. And here's my 50K annotation. And more than one I'm on. Hold on. Okay, 50K. Okay. So that is an annotation layer. I have actually taken my labels. I'm going to just go through this one time with you. Okay, my labels. To convert these labels to something that doesn't change sizes when you zoom in and out and doesn't move the labels around just to make them align better, like labeling is supposed to work. You right-click on the center line label, and the center line layer, that's the one whose labels I want to convert. You choose Convert Layer Labels to Annotation. Get this little thing. If you said in the map, it actually puts text on the map and doesn't store it in a geodatabase. So you want in a database. Now, wait a minute, it's at 40,000. Sorry, guys. Okay, I had my, it's really important that you know what scale you're at. Okay, so I'm gonna try that again. Convert labels to annotation, tells you your reference scale. You want all the features. If you were just making a little map of this area, you would pick features in the current extent, and it would just do these labels. We want all the features in the entire map. And you click on the folder right here. Pick your geodatabase, feature class, and then you name it. I've named these things. So how I do that is I'm testing for the correct size is the layer name, the word anno, the scale, and then the font size and font that you're using. Because if I were using a 12-point font at 50, it would look different than a 10-point font at 50, obviously. And then you just hit save, and it saves that as a feature class. Notice the A in front of it shows you it's an annotation layer. You already know about points, you know about lines, you know about polygons and imagery, and now this is a 5th type of feature class, annotation. Okay. Now, to test how big that is in our final layout, you know, how that would look on a map. Every time I do this, it turns them all on. Okay. So I want to go back now and say, what does this look like on my layout? Is it going to be big enough to see when I look at this at actual size. So the first thing I have to do is go back out to my map extent on this one. And this is pretty much fitting your map in as tightly as possible in the data view. And this is pretty much, you could go a little bit tighter, but it's pretty tight now. Then you switch to your layout view. Okay. You can see it's pretty tight with the data frame here. I could probably zoom it in a little bit more, but we're just going to leave it for now. Then there is something called a layout toolbar. You right click up here. You'll see there's a layout toolbar. The layout toolbar allows you to pick this zoom to 100%. So that's how big the labels would be on a printed map. I've created feature classes of annotation at 50, 55, and 60,000 for scales. I did that last night, just the way I showed you when I did those 50s a minute ago. So here's 50, here's 55, and here's 60. Okay, so remembering that you're looking at this at 100%, this is the printed size of the map. While you can read this really easily, you have to think about how difficult is it going to be to get everything labeled here? Because a lot of these don't auto-label because the labels auto-overlap, and that's the next part I'll be showing you how to work with those. This really could be a two, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but we'll have another training on just working with the annotation. So, it's like, well, this would be a pretty good size because if you get bigger and bigger, there's no way you're going to be able to get all this stuff labeled and, with those road names. I happened to choose, I think I chose the 50, I don't really know, I did 50, I think I chose the 55 ultimately to work with. Sometimes it's just good just to make a PDF, just produce the whole thing, as a PDF. And then, I'll show you. Zoom the whole page, zoom in, the whole page, okay. So I can actually, the annotation's turned on, I can do File, Export Map, and I'm going to just make it pretty low res, put it on my desktop, hit save. Then we go do. Almost done. So I've made a PDF on my desktop now of this map. Now I got to close my 800 emails and everything else that's open. Okay. Be quiet, Glenn. And here's my map I just made. And I can change this to 100%. As you can see, those labels are totally legible. They could probably be smaller. But you have to think, can we fit them everywhere? And I haven't even done the thing where I change the highways and everything to the different, to abbreviate things. So, okay, we're just going to go with this for the time being. Again, we're going to be doing a lot of this work for you early, but I'd like to have some people on board that really would like to do cartography. I know Kathleen likes to do this kind of work and likes to do map books and things as well. So, but knowing how to do this is going to be a valuable skill for a lot of reasons. So, okay, so now it's going to be time to how do we actually manipulate these labels to make them legible? I've got some more slides, but to make them legible so that we can see what's going on. First of all, there's no way on a map book, on a wall map, that we can have all of this kind of stuff labeled. It's almost impossible. You would need an inset for these things where you have, this is a mile right here. How many roads do you have in that mile? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different roads and a lot of extra space as well. These things are so close together, the human eye isn't going to be able to figure out what those road names are if we try to make tiny labels in there for a wall map. So your first job is really to work with, you know, I would start with the more rural areas of the county. The things are easier to work with. First thing we're going to do is we're going to open up the annotation layer we're working with. I actually wanted to work with 55 and not 60. And open up that table. And we're going to change in our text string. I'm going to start edit session here. Anno, and we're going to change all of, find replace, sorry. Find and replace. Remember that only that one layer, that one thing is selected here. We're going to find the word highway. And we're replacing that with HWY. And only the selected field, and we're going to replace all. Then we're going to replace the word east, but it's going to have to be space east space with space east space. That's going to only get the east that are actually inside of a road name, you know. So replace all of those, and we should see some of those pop up here as replace. See the avenues, it's the south that we'll see. See, so now that instead of South 268 East Avenue, it has E. Just made those road names shorter. You can see it happen right here as we spoke. Okay, so you can find other things you want to, you know, that you might. Cemetery C can be abbreviated CMTY. There are other things you can abbreviate, and you can abbreviate them on a one-to-one basis too. Okay, but how do you manipulate annotation? You start by starting an edit session. I already had one started. We're going to start it again just to make a clean start here on your annotation. When you do that, you have a new little tool that pops up, edit annotation, right there. I actually don't like to use that very much myself. Glenn yells at me because he likes it, or Kathleen likes it too. But that, when you click on that and you're in edit mode and you click on something, you can do things to it. You can move it around, kind of snap it. You can also grab it. Sometimes if I can get that little twist thing, where's the twist here? This tool right here lets you rotate it, right? So you could rotate it, make it upside down if you felt like that would be a good thing to do. And again, just clicking again with the annotation tool selects another one and you can move them around. When you use the drawing tool right here, the drawing toolbar and the edit toolbar should both be open. You can use that tool and you can actually select things that didn't place, like look over here. See that one right here? That means that label did not place because it would have overlapped something else, but it's still there. You can click on that and copy and paste it. Now look what happens when you do that. It got smaller. That's because it pasted onto the map because you didn't tell it to paste into your actual database. Okay? So to do that, you have to go to Drawing, Active Annotation Target, and set the layer you want it to paste into. So now, I click on it, copy, paste. You can do whatever copy, paste tools you want to use. You can use the edit, copy, paste. I'm just doing Control-C, Control-V. It puts that label out, and then you can manipulate that label and move it to the correct location. Probably another one down here. Sometimes you have to kind of, it's probably the same street. This is the same street name down here. That's why I didn't put a separate label out. You can do things like make line leaders. You could make it like down here, you know, you could pull it down here and then use your drawing tools to create a line. Again, that line can be part of an active annotation group. And you can just make a line leader like this to say, hey, it really goes up there. You can change the weight of that line by double clicking on it. I can get that to go. Hit point one, you can change it to a dotted line. You can do all sorts of things like that. So you can, you know, this is just kind of like, think about how you would see a map. There are tools to place individual labels, and then you can have kind of that line leader that actually is like part of the box that goes around the label. We don't typically use those on a wall map because you don't typically have those boxes. But you want labels not to cross lines if you can help it, not to cross each other, and you don't need these two labels here. You see? They're the exact same label on the exact same gridded road. You can delete one of them. You just highlight it and hit the delete key while you're in edit mode. This offends me. I don't like that E against the, against the side there. I don't like to straddle. You can straddle things like this if you need to, you know, not put up like, you know, not like to have the space between it on a road. But if there's space, you're going to move it. You're basically making a pretty map. I don't like to do things like this. I like the label to be on the top of the road, you know, you can kind of, you know what I'm saying, that the bottom of the label goes against the center line. Sometimes, however, it's that you almost have to make things fit. You can do that. But you could also pull it over here and then flip it around. Sorry, you gotta click it with this to flip it. And click it like this and just flip it around. Make it upside down, so now it, you know, fits correctly. Now, one of the things that I find a lot easier than doing all the flipping that you probably won't is to just double click on a layer with on a label with the draw tool. You can actually set the angle. See that angle of 358? 360 or 0 describes a straight line, horizontal line. So that just kind of made that made it 0, but you can see the road itself is at an angle. It's 0 to 360. I know some of you are familiar with this, others aren't. A 90-degree angle. That 270 is the other way.
I believe 0 starts on the east and goes counterclockwise. So 45 degrees would move it up to like 130.
You're right. Yeah.
90 degrees moves it to 12. So
I have an idea though that, I mean, I know this because of GPS and having to do GPS projections and say, hey, it's, you know, in early days of GPS, it wasn't real time. You would sit in front of a house and you say that house is 100 feet away and it's you know, southeast or whatever, and that's like a whatever that angle is, 70 degrees. You have to, that's why I know these things. I think for most of us, you would just do this and you would just rotate it.
Hey, Susan.
So like, yes.
I'm sorry. Do you ever, with the annotation tool, do you ever double click and use the create features window?
Yeah, so you can basically.
It didn't pop up, but if you go under editor,
Yeah,
it'll I don't know why it doesn't pop up sometimes.
I think it's just.
Well, there it is over there.
Yeah, it is.
I was just going to say you can do that angle thing with that too.
Yeah, and you can do the angle in here too. That's why Kathleen does this actually almost more frequently than I do, especially for math books. And we do things very differently because of our history. But if you double click on a feature, you're going to get this create feature. And then you can, you know, since it's already created, it's going to let you edit things about it. You could change the name. You could change the font size. You can go up by 2 and down by 2 in almost all cases and not affect it. Like if this was really tight there, I changed that font size to 8. Didn't work, Kathleen. Didn't shrink it.
Just put your, you may have to just sweep it on the create features
like
window,
this?
and then do it. Yeah, and then do it.
Yeah, you're right. That's silly.
And then apply. There
yeah,
you go.
so then, yeah. So
or you just go to the attributes tab.
So yeah, so I mean that's why you can do so much with the drawing that it can be dangerous, because if you don't have your target set, it will just leave all these things all over your map. You can change it right here. The only thing about changing it here is you've got to go to change symbol and then change do it on that second panel. So it takes longer. So really just double clicking with that edit attribute when you're in edit mode and double clicking, sweep it, change it to 8, 9, whatever, apply it. If you want to make it a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger just to fit. Sometimes these are really easy. If you were doing a wall map of Cotton County, you'd have that whole thing done in a couple hours. Seriously, I mean, because the auto labeling would be very good, because the roads are all straight. There aren't a lot of little roads at all. It's all these section line roads. It'd be a very, very, very easy map to create. It could take us a couple days to get the roads labeled in Wagner County, because you have to deal with these small things and, you know, the insets and things. You know, like on this road here, get that one out of the way. There's a different road here at the end, I bet. that didn't place. See, there it is. So not only do we have this road to label, we have this one to label as well. Now, that's just kind of hard to deal with. I don't like labels like this for these little tiny roads. What I typically do is I just make them straight and I use a line leader, you know, and probably make it a little bit smaller, and then I would make one of those lines to go from this road to that road. There's no way we can do a complete attribution and labeling training in an hour. I mean, it's something you get more comfortable with the longer you do it. This is really not a great line leader. This really should be further away. This, you know, you can actually edit these lines. You know, they can be like this, you know. You can do different colors, whatever you want to do, but most of our maps are printed in full color, but there isn't a lot of color on them. Different, you know, there's usually not, unless they want fire boundaries or something, we usually try to stick to the more readable colors and fonts. Kathleen has had to adjust colors minutely because they see the color on the screen and they want that to be the color that prints, and we all know that the color that prints is going to be dependent on the printer that they use and the process, you know, of if it's a PDF, if they use RGB or whatever else. So, but people get kind of crazy about those kinds of things. How I work though is I just work in areas and just go, yeah, I basically go north to south, you know, east to west, and just you're making sure that every road has a legible label on it, and that label is in a, you know, like if you look at these roads that run north-south, you know, or east-west for a long ways, like this is all one road right here. How many labels does that need? Does it need 1, 2, 3 labels? Probably not. It's kind of it's a talent you kind of develop to say, okay, if I put one here and I put one there, do I really need this one? You know, but you don't need one on every section because it's a wall map. And somebody's going to be standing in front of it, looking at it, and, you know, using their brain capacity. They don't have to have a label on every little section. If you were doing a map book, you need a label, every road labeled on every page. Because this could be 3 different map book pages, and then those three things would be pretty appropriate for that, those 3 labels. If there's one that's not labeled, like something like this, usually you can pick it up by just doing that, you know, just sweeping and seeing what labels are not placed there. So you grab that and just copy and paste it. If there weren't one there for some reason, you can copy anything and paste it and just change the name. I'm just going to assume this is like 30, you know, 30, that was 30th, 35th. Oh no. See what happened here? I picked up the one that was the unseen label. That's 33rd. So you can just grab another one and just edit it. Or grab the unplaced label, copy and paste it, and then just move it back. Okay. On highways, like this US Highway 69, you can do change symbol. My computer is really slow. Go down and grab the US Highway sign thing. Notice I still have US Highway. I'll change that label in a minute. And then I go to edit. There's one thing you have to do with these. You have to make the text scale with the symbol, and there's like a little convoluted way to do that. Advanced text properties, background, I think, scale marker to fit. Like you would never ever be able to find that on your own. It's just a kind of buried. Anyway, then when I get back to this one, I'll change it to 69. Apply it. Okay. Now that I have one, probably needs to be a little bigger than that because it's, you know, a major highway. And I know there are different ways of doing all of these things, and I'm sure talking to Glenn and Kathleen will get you some better ideas. But once you do that, you can just copy and paste that sucker all the way down the highway, you know, like this, wherever you need one. And there's one more thing you can do that I advise you to do with these big maps like this. Since we're not going to be working in cities, you can no way label the city names on the big map. You can do a select by location. So we're going to select from the 55K, point labels. We're going to use Wagner cities as our source. And then we can just hit the delete key and all those labels will go away. Some of these are outside the city because the city has, you can't see it, it has this little, do I have a buffer on that, guys? Shouldn't pick this one up. Ryan, does that little buffer on the city come out here? I think it does. Yeah, see this right here? That's the city limit.
Is this the
So
city
in this
of
case,
Wagner?
yeah, remember it's got that little, that
Yeah,
extra jurisdictional thing?
it does
So
that.
I'm just going to go ahead because those can always be replaced. It's just easier just to hit that delete key or open up your table. It's deleting 1,700. It deleted almost half or more than half the labels that way. It didn't look like it worked. I guess it did. Okay. Yeah, so then you just kind of get rid of the extra labels that you're not going to ever use just by doing a select by location and get rid of them. It's just, they're just very annoying when you have to deal with those all the time because they redraw every time you zoom in and out. So I always do the low hanging fruit first. We're going to go through and do these kinds of roads, the section line roads. This is stupid Wagner that we lost a lot of those road names now. And then I go into the dense areas, and the dense areas just take a lot more attention. Probably this little area, if the county maintains, it's going to become an inset. Insets are going to require separate data frames. We won't even really talk about those now, but you actually load the data. You make another data frame in your map here under the layer, and you load the data again there, and you have a separate annotation layer just for the insets. It's much more zoomed in. It's a much smaller font size. So let's just kind of open it up to questions. I think that really what we're talking about now that you'll be asked to do first is manipulating your annotation, moving it around so everything is labeled. And that means you're going to be creating new labels. You're going to be moving existing labels. You may be editing the content of existing labels just to just so that they, might be abbreviated if they're too long, or even just changing the size of the label if it's just a little bit too big to fit where it fit in the little boundary that you have for it. Sometimes it's just copying one, so you have a label here and a label here. But again, annotation tool right here will allow you to move that annotation from one place to another. You just drag or whatever to spin it with the tool right here on the editing toolbar, the rotate tool. And it will also, by double clicking, allow you to change the attributes. Okay. In a lot of counties where they're like these E660s and everything, you can almost always drop off that RD just to make it fit in a tight spot because all of the county roads end in RD. This county, however, once you hit a certain spot, they've got these streets, places, avenues, terraces. So dropping off that, it could be the same number. It could be E660 Street, E660 Terrace, Glen, Grove is the same way, right? You don't want to drop off that street type unless they only use one street type for a county road name. Okay. Better just to shrink the whole thing. Reviewing your steps, you've got to get the map set up, decide what layers are being labeled, create your labels, convert it to annotation, mess with the size till you get the size right. All of those things take a very short time compared to making sure everything is labeled. Okay, so you pick a scale to work at, you work in the view of that scale, and then you start moving things around. You can always produce PDFs of any certain area, just, if you want to see what things look like. But if somebody's paying us to create a map, we have to give them a map that looks good. Can't give them a map that's, looks like we just threw it together. If we're doing it, however, for a client, like you're doing something, Curtis or Glenn from McCurtain County, just to show a developer what's there. If we do it for doing a subdivision in Wagner County and we're showing them a screenshot of the subdivision, my recommendation is instead of converting the annotation to a geodatabase, you just convert it to the map for that little section you're working on. Then you can move the labels around, make the map, and just delete those labels when you're done. They're just little graphics on the map at that point. Then you don't have to go through this, it's a much tighter area. You don't have to worry about maintaining the annotations for future maps. The good thing about this, if we do this Wagner County project and they want another map in 6 months, all we have to do is change the labels for the roads that are new or that have changed. These annotations are a physical layer with the map. They can go on any map of Wagner County, obviously, especially one that's that they want to have produced at the same scale. As long as it's readable, we can use the labels. Julie, I think that, there's a lot of content here. Following up with a workshop with Glenn or Kathleen or myself for those that, we'd like. I know I'm going to give some to Ryan. I probably have some to give to Danny as well. Curtis is probably already uses these kinds of things with his McCurtain work. But in that kind of scenario, we might just want to have a little workshop about just actually producing a map of a small area in the county and seeing what everybody does with it and how they handle certain situations. Because I pretty much just touched on all of it. There are a lot of other cartographic things, in ArcGIS that you can use if you had all the time in the world. The problem is we don't. We get paid by the hour. We give clients, we don't get paid by the hour. We estimate by the hour. So if I tell them it's going to cost $2,500 to do this, and it takes us 40 hours, and I expected it to take 20 hours, then we have not, we've expended twice as much time for the same amount of money. So having some people that just are good at this and know how good, how good is good enough is so much of it. If you are really liking cartography a lot, and you really love to make a pretty map, you could spend days and days and days doing something like this. It is a rabbit hole. It's a time suck. And you just, we want to develop some people that can do this pretty quickly and accurately without getting mired in, is this close enough? Do I have enough labels? Should I delete this label or not? So. Kathleen, any comments based on your experience with these things, or Glenn, or anybody?
No, I don't think so. You're right, though. It's just time consuming. It really is just doing these labels. I mean, I think this is the worst part of making a map.
It is. Yeah. Glenn?
I would just add that all these things that happen in the layout view, we could spend a week and not even get the high level stuff talking about all the things that are possible.
Yeah.
It's
That's
amazing.
I think that those of us, since I have more experience trying to figure out what the label scale should be and creating the base layer of annotation, by the time I gave a project to Ryan or to Danny or whomever, or to Curtis, or whatever, to move these labels around, you're going to expect to have labels that are already abbreviated, already placed at the appropriate scale. But you still have to make decisions about, like, what do you do about this little area here, And
right.
you zoom in and you copy and paste and you move things around and you make it as clear as you can. That's what you do.
The only thing I thought of, Susan, that they might like, and I don't know if you use them, is when you're setting your layout up, you can use you can set guides on the rulers That's pretty cool.
So you can see the little blue lines through, you mean?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
things
yeah,
that, so you could snap to that with other.
Yeah. And that's
Anyway.
why the layout has so many things that we just don't use it frequently because we're not, we're going to throw
not
a quick map
cartographers.
together for somebody. We're not cartographers. We simply are. GIS is not cartography. Cartography is all about making a legible, there's a lot of cartographic elements in it, and we use it when we set up our go-to-it maps and everything. But when you make a paper map, you can't click to see, you can't identify a road on a paper map. You need to have that label. So it's not something I even think it's a particularly profitable thing for us to do because it is such a time crunch, but it is something that our clients demand. And because they demand it, we don't want them looking for other people, other services, providers who could provide the cartography and the GIS, right? So we want to make sure that we can answer their need, but we're not going out soliciting this kind of work. However, this is the kind of work that you could easily do, for some of the, we have so much demand now with doing these plats and these, subdivisions and things, that instead of trying to move your map around and make sure everything auto labels, just convert it to annotation on the map. Just make graphics on the map that you can move around. And that basically looks like, if I just, labeled this, and then I said, convert to annotation, convert labels to annotation, but just said in the map and current extent. Now I have, these are the unplaced ones. Now I can just take any of these and just, without even not being in an edit session, scoot them around. You can make a really nice, you can make a map to send away or something and be able to move your labels around. And then when you're finished and you produce that map, just select all those things and delete them. They're gone. They're just like graphics on the map. They're not part of a layer. Okay. That's probably all the time we have because I've got to get out of here in 20 minutes and get up to Sheridan County. If anybody has any questions, we will follow up.